diving is a crazy sport for a number of reasons. We train for big numbers, 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're doing weight training. Each dive from the 10 meter takes 1.6 seconds. In the Olympic final, it was a straight final. So we had 5 dives at the time. Men do 6 now, but at the time, 5 dives. Each dive takes 1.6 seconds and every single dive counts. So it absolutely puts so much pressure on you every single time.
Welcome back to Dive Beyond Sport, the podcast where performance meets humanity. Today's guest is Leon Taylor. Thank you so much for joining us, Leon. I'm super excited for this conversation.
Amazing. So, Leon, actually, I want to start this podcast slightly self-indulgently. Just to tell a quick story. So this is, I want to start with just like a story about 8-year-old Freddie. I've been diving not very long, and I go down to my local pool, is Ponds Forge, and this is probably September 2004, and I've just been watching the Athens Olympic Games, and I watched Team GB win their first diving medal from what I understood was since the 1960s or something crazy. And I go down to my pool, and one of the guys who's I've watched on TV win a silver medal in the Olympic Games is there, and he places this silver medal around my neck. And this is 8-year-old me, and I feel the weight of this thing. And obviously, you know, Leon, this man is you, and now we're here doing this podcast, the three of us Olympians. So yeah, over 20 years later than that event, but that memory is so strongly imprinted in my mind. And so I actually just want to start by saying thank you for being a huge inspiration to me.
Well, this is where I get to feel old, isn't it, guys? Because I know both of you were young whippersnappers as I was at that point in my career. And let me share a story in return, Freddie, because what was most interesting for me, and maybe you guys have got your own versions of this now that you're old and retired from sport. What was interesting, guys, is that when Peter and I won that medal, first medal in 44 years, and that was personally a 20-year dream. So I remember watching the TV when I was 6, watching the Olympic Games from LA. And I was so inspired by those events, particularly by Daley Thompson and how he was whistling on the podium. And then I told my dad then at 6, I wanted to go to the Olympics. And I'd ask him every few weeks, when are the Olympics back on? I'd get the Guinness Book of World Records every Christmas, and I'd write down my best swimming time because I was a swimmer initially, my best score in diving. It's just this whole thing. And then can you imagine, and you will resonate, when you achieve something from a personal endeavor. So standing on that podium was a dream, and it was a dream for so long that when it happens, you aren't sure whether you're still dreaming. So the reality is you've got an Olympic medal next to you and you're asleep in Athens, and then you wake up and you go, oh, it's true, right? And it's this weird sensation. But let me tell you something I wasn't expecting. What I wasn't expecting was this overwhelming sense of responsibility that I wasn't ready for. And it sounds a little trite now, so I'm just going to frame it. But it was like, I said to Pete, we were flying home. We did well in the individual, but we didn't win any medals, but we performed well. So we went out to celebrate for 2 days straight. So when we were on the way back, we were sleeping mainly on the flight. But I remember having a conversation with Pete, and I said, listen, mate, are you feeling this as well? And he was like, yeah, man, we've got to do something with this. Not for us as individuals, but for us as a sport. And I remember saying, right, let's do it. Let's get up to Edinburgh. Let's get to as many of the diving clubs as we can to get more people involved, get youngsters in, right? And what was really powerful for me was making that decision to do that. Because it wasn't hard for me, Freddie, because I was in Sheffield, right? So putting that around your neck was easy for me to do, but I did know the power of that, because when I was 10, I held an Olympic medal from a swimmer, 100-meter butterfly bronze medalist from the 88 Olympic Games in Seoul. He came to my swimming club in Cheltenham, which is where I was born, and he handed out his Olympic medal. And so for me, the default was share this medal. I went into schools, I opened fates, I speak corporately, a professional speaker, I take it to events and I hand out the medal. I'm very relaxed with it. And so far, I haven't lost it yet. But it was funny, really, that you mentioned that moment and what significance it was for you, because it was a surprise for me. Because as we know, when we're sports people, we have to operate in quite a self-centered way, not necessarily selfish, but you've got to put your sport first. You make difficult decisions, and then to have it flipped on its head in the greatest personal achievement moment of your life was this real cognitive dissonance for me. So I just wanted to start with that reflection because of your opening, and I needed to get away from feeling old for a second.
It's really interesting that you say all that, first of all, and also Freddie's story, because there's so many similarities to my experience, and I want to take my opportunity to tell my story as well. I watched the same Olympics just after I started diving. I watched you and Pete win that silver medal, and for me it was slightly different because I didn't have that close connection to you in Sheffield. So I remember just seeing the adulation and celebration around the medal being put around your neck and the olive wreath that you had placed on your head. All of that just really inspired me to want to become an Olympian one day, to want to be a part of whatever that was. I didn't really understand what it meant. I didn't know what my path was to get there. I just knew I wanted to be a part of it. And that was hugely inspiring. And the first time I think I met you was the following year. There was a national championships, I believe, in Manchester in 2005. And I remember speaking to you, and I just couldn't believe that you would give me the time as the person of your status to just have that conversation. And I remember my mum responding, so positively and well to that, which is first of all brilliant. But what you then say about feeling that responsibility to share the medal and share the success and share what you achieved with others to bring the sport up, also is relatable to me, because I feel the same way now in my position, having done the Olympics a few times and representing Jamaica, but not just over there, but over here, like wanting to share my knowledge. That's why I want to stay involved in diving as a coach, because I feel a responsibility to share my knowledge. I feel like it's a shame sometimes when you have a really experienced athlete in any sport leave their sport and just take all their knowledge with them. I really want to share my knowledge and help lift the next generation up. So kind of like Freddie, I also want to say thank you, because not only the diving side of things, but also what to do when you achieve success. That's something that was very inspiring for me as well. So there you go, a little bit more for you to take away.
Yeah, I mean, look, and it's hard, right? Because I'm British, and I don't, like most of us, don't really like to take compliments, but I get it, and thank you back, because it's nice to know that it works, right? That those decisions made in the time, the effort that goes into giving back,
because giving back it's not easy, is it? It's hard to like actually take that time to really give back and believe that, as you say, what you're doing in that moment works.
Yeah, and I suppose you guys would have felt it as well. Like when you've been in a world where it's all about you, right? You're surrounded by people who are experts at the highest level. Is wonderful, isn't it? Because you get to this point where we're fortunate in the UK, and I was the first generation to feel the benefits of their funding, right? So I was able to work with nutritionists, physiologists, strength conditioning coaches, all of these amazing, that all of your guests talk so brilliantly about how much of a difference that makes. But when you're in a world where it's all about you and your performance, and everyone is inputting into you, and you're the big thing, everything's coming in one way, isn't it? And then to shift, right? And the shift was really interesting for me, because in order to find contentment, I needed to kind of shift the paradigm, right? So the fulfillment now for me is all about other people. And I was only able to make that shift once I'd kind of scratched the itch of how good can I be in this space, right? And then the people who struggle to let go of it's about me and what I achieve, and my worth is based on my achievements, are the ones who I feel struggle more. The ones who make the shift of, like you're doing, Yona, well, I'm going to coach and I'm going to throw my energy, effort, my experience, all of my passion into this. You feel very intrinsically rewarded from that pursuit, right? But it's different, isn't it? To all about you. Here I am in the gym. Here I am doing this. Here I am saying no to this opportunity or this wedding or whatever it might be that you're making these decisions. And then to shift it to go, actually, look at these young athletes for me in different sports with their challenges, with the things. Oh, that's amazing. I can guide them, and I don't need to be read out in the Oscar speech. Oh, I'd like to say thank you to It's not about that. It's just playing that small, sometimes more significant part in someone else's progression, right? It's so satisfying. In fact, I would argue it's more satisfying than the self-indulgent, can you be the best in the world road. And I don't want to discount my backstory, because that was massively insightful, powerful, and I wouldn't want to change what happened to get there. So now to flip it on its head and give back is where I
suppose
find myself
without
still
the
now.
backstory you can't deliver the advice and the support, because you don't have that understanding. I mean, I remember clearly as well, like how much mentorship and stuff you gave to Tom Daley, and I always found that really interesting. But what I think it's fascinating hearing you say that, and I'm already starting to feel the same thing of, actually it's more rewarding doing things for other people. But how, this is probably a really difficult question, but what would your advice be to current athletes, therefore, like this, who are still actively competing and are pursuing their own purpose and their own personal goals?
Yeah, so I'm always a little reticent with the advice, because and I'm not being difficult. It's like when you're an athlete and someone tells you to do something. When I was an athlete, I'd fold my arms and go, right, well, I'm not doing that then. And you get this kind of like lots of things, but my suggestions or where I kind of focus my mentoring conversations, it's the what else question. And this kind of comes in, Freddie, with your, like, well, what would you say? Because I made the mistake, as many athletes do, to focus only on performance, which for me is unbalanced. And when it's going well, you're okay. And often when it doesn't, you're screwed, right? And so let's talk about Tom, because this is a great example. And I use him as the inspiration as he is for many of us. It was like Tom Daley and knitting is the great example of the what else are you doing. I remember talking to Tom on as we are now virtually. It's COVID. The Olympic Games have just been cancelled. Not quite cancelled, moved a year. And I said to him, and I couldn't wait to hear what I said. What are you going to do? And then I just zipped it like that, ready to listen. And then he said to me, so he'd obviously been working on various things over years. So he'd been practicing yoga, he'd been doing meditation. So he understood the power of mindfulness, settling down the monkey mind, as we often refer to it. And he said, I'm going to teach myself to knit. And then I immediately laughed, because I thought he was joking. And he went, no, I'm going to teach myself to knit. And I said, why? And he said, because I'm working on my mindfulness, right? And then every picture of Tom from that day onwards was him with a COVID mask on, knitting, right? And what did that do? Well, he had something else as engaging, almost as important than the performance. So my question to athletes that I'm working with mentoring is, what else is important to you and meaningful to you that you can get stuck into? And not as a dopamine, I'm going to smash Mobland in like thoughts, which is very good, by the way, all 10 episodes, or I'm going to do this, or all these dopamine kind of like hacks that we've got available. But meaningful work often involves other things. And to your point, Freddie, can involve other people. So if you're able to give a little bit of time to something else, could be a charity, could be coaching in your sport for a little bit of remuneration. It could be a number of things, and we're all as unique as our thumbprint. So I have no idea what it is for an athlete until that discussion takes place. And I feel that the intention behind it is simple, is to address that balance. Yes, performing requires so much energy, so much commitment, and it's exhausting, and you don't feel like doing anything else. And it's easy to fall in the trap of I am a, and it becomes your identity. But you're a human being, and there's way more that you can offer. And the balance will allow you to do what Tom did, was get out of his own way after not going so well in Rio, focus on the really important things in this world for him, and then by default win Olympic gold, which he dreamed about since he was however old. So I think it's just a really lovely example, isn't it, within our sport?
I find it interesting, kind of going a bit back to you defining your focus on performance as a mistake, which suggests that you had a choice to either really just 100% focus on performance or do other things whilst you were competing. And I'm interested to know, diving sport in that era of the 80s and 90s, did you have a choice, or was it, you have to perform, you had to take that approach, and only in hindsight do you realize that it wasn't actually necessary for you to still achieve the same level of success that you did?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, you're informed by your culture, aren't you? And so in the 90s, it was Wild West in sport. It was very much hobby, and then you had to become. We didn't have to, but they had the opportunity to become more professional. And then the pendulum swang for me too far. It became too much of a, like, my mentors basically were like, right, drink this, smoke this, come on, get up the next day. So there was a very different feel, like when I first started, when I was very young. And then of course the funding comes in, and then it's like, right, you need to be professional. We're like, what's that? Right. And so then we had to figure it out. And this is me being completely honest. And so from figuring it out, we then thought that you needed to just perform, right? So the pendulum swang. And then you realize, hang on, that's not right. So where it got me with just focusing on performance was this. Injuries would come in, and because of the culture of the 90s and pain is weakness leaving the body, and you've got to be tough and blah, blah, blah. Don't ask for help. What happened to me is I had 2 reconstructive shoulder surgeries, which pretty much looked like my career was going to end. That was after the Olympic Games that we placed 4th in, because we were so focused on performance and taking it so seriously, or I certainly was, driving this thing. And then the wheels came off, and I suffered with my mental health, which I've spoken openly about, because I didn't ask for help. Because why? I had this culture, which was, you're tough. Everyone comes to you for help. Like, how dare you cry into your cornflakes? Suck it up, get on with it. Focus on your body fat percentage, or focus on your visualization, and all about performance. And, my mental health suffered. And then through figuring it out through that period, I suddenly realized that actually there's other things that, there's things much more important, and I need to start to address that balance. And I figured it out. And then of course, once I'd figured it out, all I was doing in Athens was smiling, which sounds trite, but I was savoring every moment, embracing what happened. I had this perspective of like, well, whatever happens, happens. And I've got a strong preference for high performance. And it was about performance, not medals. And it was about routine and process. And it was about having fun. There's pictures of Peter and I in Athens laughing in between dives to the point where we're crying, right? Because we're just doing stuff in between, honestly, because our focus was that. It was just like the 20 minutes in between rounds, we were playing a game called Pass the Pigs. And at the same time, we were like talking about fun events that, we were looking forward to, or we'd heard. Anyway, and it was just a very different experience. We were smiling on the bus on the way to the Olympic final, right? As if we were going out for the night, because that's kind of what it felt like. And then we were able to achieve what we always dreamed of by having much more of a balance. And having a balance isn't not training hard, because you guys know that train our socks off, right? But it's about not taking it too seriously. And by too seriously, I mean squeezing the life out of it, because it's just so rigid and so tension and so stressful and so anxious, and all these things cause underperformance anyway.
That's something I relate to massively. First of all, the pasta pigs mentioned, that's amazing. Don't tell me you got like a double leaning jowler in the middle of your Olympic event.
Listen, there was all sorts of chaos going on. What would happen is we get close to 100, and then one of us would throw a pig at the arena, and then we'd just be like rolling back on our last going, shit. And then, of course, what's happening is the Chinese, the Americans, the Canadians, they're looking over going, this is the Olympic final. What the bloody hell are Waterfield and Taylor doing? They're just messing about. And that was the thing, right? So it wasn't to put them off, although it probably did slightly. But yeah, good pasta pigs.
I have no idea what this pasta pigs is. So for the people in the back who don't know what you're talking about, can I have a brief explanation?
Yeah. Let's just leave it then for the. Yeah, they're plastic pigs, okay, and they're a bit like dice. So you roll them, they land in different positions, and you get different scores, right? And it's about keeping them in the arena that you're playing in. It could be the top of a coffee table or something smaller. And you've got to know when to stick. But the pigs have got a mind of their own sometimes, and they can play all sorts of games with you. And you don't need to be, speaking the same language, although luckily Peter and I did. But the reason we did that, and it's like, you guys know, but maybe your audience don't. Diving is a crazy sport for a number of reasons. Okay, we train for big numbers, 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. 6 days a week. We're doing weight training. Each dive from the 10 meter takes 1.6 seconds. In the Olympic final, it was a straight final. So we had 5 dives at the time. So it's men do 6 now, but at the time, 5 dives. Each dive takes 1.6 seconds, and every single dive counts. So it's not like the long jump. Lucky, Yaz, who gets to choose her best jump or whatever. It's like every dive counts. So it absolutely puts so much pressure on you every single time. Because if you make one mistake, you guys know, you're pretty much out of it. Now, the hard thing is that you've got a gap in between each of those 1.6 seconds. And the 15, 20 minutes in between each is where the competition is won and lost. That's where you go to jelly. That's where your mind wanders. That's where you start overthinking about, this is important, isn't it? I've trained 6 hours a day, 6 days a week for the last 4 years. It's 10,000 hours. It comes down to this next book, boom. And then you're screwed, aren't you? You're in fight, flight, freeze, and you can't perform. So the pasta pigs came into its own because we needed something to keep us in the right emotional regulated state, right? And so we would play this game, and of course it wasn't the Olympic Games that we tried this in other competitions, because music could be highly emotive. Playing cards didn't really work for us, sitting there on our own, trying to make conversation. So we just got this routine where the pigs were the thing that we would just get through, and then boom 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 boom, and then we go, and it was just this perfect process that would captivate us enough in order to drop into that flow state of performance.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is so good. And I know, looking back on my career, that I took it way too seriously. Because, I started immediately in this, high performance pathway. I was talent spotted, which is great. But it's from day one, it's you are here to try and go to the Olympic Games. This is the path you're on, which was fantastic. And I bought into it, but it was serious. It was serious from, and I know that I spent, and especially when I chose not to go to university. And so those 3 years between being 18 and 21, where I competed in Rio, were, I did some great work, but also a lot of that was pretty miserable, because I was just so wrapped up in my own stuff. And it's exactly what you said. It's overthinking and letting, our minds just ruminating on this stuff, and it's just really not helpful. And I actually love I read about this, and this wasn't something I actually realized, but this kind of advice and this tip you realize of actually smiling. And it sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, if you're feeling unhappy or something, just smile. It's it's sort of too obvious. It's too surface level. But I think there's a fundamental truth to it. By actually physically smiling, you're I don't know, your body position changes Right. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, no, please.
Yes. Yeah. So what's interesting is I experienced that firsthand anecdotally, and I was fascinated. So I've done much research on it. So physiology and emotion are a two-way street. Sometimes because we're feeling the emotion of happiness, we smile, and that's a result. And the opposite is true. By smiling, so this is a fake smile, obviously, but after a while, if Yona was to smile back at me, I would then move to what's known as a Duchenne smile, which then completely changes my brain chemistry. And you cannot not communicate, right, with yourself and with whoever you're in front of. So if I do professional speaking, as you guys know, so if I'm standing there and I'm shitting and I'm, crapping myself in front of the audience,
We can
which
swear,
often
by the way.
happens, if I just bring on, yeah, okay, great. So if I'm shitting it, right, I'm going to be standing in front of the audience and they're going to see that. And then it's going to compound in the way that we don't want to. It's going to go into a vicious cycle. So just by gently smiling and looking around, okay, even though my internal state is going bananas, because it feels it's under threat, the smile is just undoing that. So the neurochemistry is starting to change. And then all I need to do is catch the eye of someone who's got a genuine smile on their face. And then I turn into a genuine smile. And you can't hold fear, the neurobiology of fear, at the same time as you can of happiness. And what happened for me anecdotally, Freddie, is that period of depression, right? You talked about physiology. I walked around like this, shoulders hunched, furrowed brow, not smiling, right? So I'm sending a clear signal to my nervous system that I'm not safe. My cortisol's through the roof, my testosterone's low, hormonally I'm all over the place. And I'm in the physiology of depressing, right? And for me, it was a period of depression. And when I came out of that, it was a moment where Steve Foley, a name that you guys will recognize, who was who's a diver himself, he just said this very simple thing to me when the wheels had come off. It was after my second surgery. In fact, I decided that was it. I was quitting. And I was in tears on a poolside way out in Seville. And he just asked me a question which could have just shifted everything. And he just gently asked me, hand on the shoulder, he said, "Why do you do this sport?" Right. And the answer to that isn't because there's loads of money and because it was, and I, through the tears, I kind of said, because I enjoy it. And that was like, well, why haven't I seen you smile for the last 6 months? Because I've been taking it so seriously. So the only change I made when I went back to training was this, and it really hurt. And it wasn't it was like a forced smile, but you kind of stayed with it. And then my experience, that vicious cycle I was stuck in, started to go into a virtuous cycle. And then suddenly everything starts to change. So my relationship with my own thoughts completely changes. And then my teammates engage with me in a positive way. And then I'm like, actually, I do like the diving. And then a few months after that point, I nearly won gold at the Commonwealth. It's only Pete bloody Waterfield that beat me by like 0.2 of a point, which is fine because I love him. But that could have been my goals.
That's it. That's a brilliant story. I can totally imagine Steve Foley with that approach. A very quiet
and it's important.
voice, but
it's
a
important,
very
right?
powerful statement and a very powerful question. Absolute legend of the game. But you're totally right. You know when you're like upset or you're not happy or whatever, and then someone just comes to like try and make you smile, and you fight, and that first time you break a smile, then everything suddenly like goes away and you feel so much better. So you're right, like the smile does make such a big impact. I'm actually interested now, like to kind of hear even more about your backstory. And already I'm hearing a lot of context that I didn't know about you, and lots of things that I'm learning, like my experience of Athens at the time. I didn't know that that's what you were doing between rounds, and it just all makes sense knowing what I know now. But going back even further, you spoke about, being given an Olympic medal when you were younger to hold, which created this dream for you. I'd love to hear a bit more about, your upbringing, your introduction into diving, and also the perception maybe that you had, or that people had of you outside of diving at that time, because, the way that the sport is perceived now, thanks to people like yourself and Tom, is very, very different to how it was, I imagine, then. So it'd just be interesting to hear a bit about that part of your life.
Yeah, sure. All right. Well, I mean, like most of us, I think you guys included, our parents needed to do something with us, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in my case, unfortunately, when I was born, it wasn't straightforward. Traumatic birth meant I didn't sleep, meant my parents didn't sleep, and it was all very stressful. I had all the, I was never diagnosed as a young age. I was diagnosed as a problem child, and they were offered the same medication that you would get offered for ADHD. So I needed constant attention. I used to drive my parents bananas. And so they quickly didn't go down the medication route, but they quickly knew that I needed to be tired out through physical activity. So movement was my medicine, and kind of informed my 2018 TED Talk, where I talk about managing your mental health through movement, which, was very relatable to my backstory. My experience was I couldn't concentrate at school because sit still, be quiet, and concentrate weren't available to me. But what was available to me was move vigorously. And so my life of sporting endeavors started way before I can remember. Physical memories, kind of, you can start to recall them from 5. But before that, I was at parent and baby gymnastics, tumble tots. I was already a swimmer, and I started diving actually, just because it was one of the many sports that I was offered. So my mum would say, "Do you want to try?" Yes. And then the name of the sport would come afterwards. And I was terrible at football. So that was no good. And I went off and I went to judo, and I got kicked out of judo because I couldn't wait to go into the bit. I'd get kicked out because I was fighting all the time. So I must be the only person to be kicked out of judo for fighting. So my parents had a hell of a time with me. And then diving was just one of the many sports that came along. But where I was based in Cheltenham, in Gloucestershire, we had the swimming club, where I was already familiar. I'd be at the pool all the time. And then they had a separate diving pool, a 1 meter, 3 meter, 5 meter, volunteer coach, like backwater kind of thing. Anyway, I started diving, and because I'd been doing gymnastics since I was 7 months old in some kind of form, I mean, I could do a handstand. I kind of knew where I was when I was upside down. And then, of course, I loved the water. And then by the time I was 11, I was competing nationally at 3 sports, so swimming, gymnastics, and diving. And in swimming, I was 16th for the 100 backstroke. Gymnastics, I was 4th. And then diving actually won a gold in the national championships. I got a gold and a bronze. And that's when I made my career decision at the age of 11. Because you guys know, and it was like that in the late 80s into the 90s, that you need to train as much as you can, even then. And so it meant I had to retire from gymnastics at the age of 11. So I needed to do diving every day. But I could swim every morning at 5 a.m., which was great for school because I would arrive at school with less of the anxious energy because I'd been plowing up and down the pool. And that served me till I stopped swimming when I was around 14. And then I got a handle on my rapid thoughts and my attention jumping around. And I was able to, through movement and through various other kind of, I guess you could call them psychological techniques or coping skills, strategies, I was able to then drop into what was required of me in the academic system as well, and not be the problem child or the disruptor. So yeah, I ended up throwing myself off a diving board to tire myself out, and then quite liked it. So followed my Olympic dreams.
It is so interesting because I did watch that TED Talk recently, knowing that we were going to be doing this interview, this podcast, and so I watched it back. I think I watched it probably, more at the time when it came out, but obviously watched it again, and obviously hearing that story, it's clear that your experience as a child is so fundamental as well to like that belief system of how, movement is medicine. But then also, so I think it's interesting that that's like the starting point, that you already recognize as a young boy that you needed to do something to get rid of a lot of the anxiety. You already learned that. But then also taking that forward, for example, when did this idea really cement? Because obviously you, post retiring from diving, you really got interested in yoga, correct? And you seem to do all sorts of stuff. So like, what was the process of this really strong belief of like movement is medicine? When did that really cement itself?
Yeah, good question. So these things reveal themselves over time through experience, don't they? And when movement is your job, it kind of blurs it a little bit. So like you guys, and I know because I've read some of your posts, and I know you guys reasonably well, that it's hard, isn't it, when you go from your job is keeping fit and training, and then you need to decide, what am I going to do to keep fit, or am I going to decide to become unfit? Right? Some people choose that one, and for me, what happened, I got to the end of my diving career, and through poor choices, again, performance focused poor choices, I ended up not having 2 reconstructed shoulders. I had 4 on the same shoulder. But it was my lower back that retired me. So as in my injury to my lower back I retired just before what would have been my 4th games. And platform diving, you're on limited time. Anyway, so the medical team, Institute of Sport in Sheffield, were concerned about me, and they said, look, your back is today, you just had hernia surgery, you've had 4 shoulder surgeries, you're 30 and you're probably going to be in pain for the rest of your life in certain areas if you don't make some smart choices now. And the choices they offered me were, stop everything you're doing. What am I going to do? I'm going to go bananas if I can't move, right? So I was already aware of that and their propensity to like push and to check. And they said, you need to do something like Pilates or yoga in order to rebalance your unbalanced body and to try and help you with the pain you're in. And I was really nervous because I'd done Pilates as part of my training, and I thought, God, that's not going to be fulfilling because it's not, my adrenaline fueled existence, like lying on a mat, activating your inner core and lifting your leg. I was like, oh, I kind of get it. And it's great, but that's not going to keep me from going insane. Right. So I was like, well, what's yoga? And at the time, this is 2008. So I went on online and I got completely confused. I thought, is it a religion? Is it just for people in India? There's a church hall in Crawley that does it, but that's all women. Like, what the hell do I do? So I was like, shit. So what I did this, and I just went onto my email list and I just put an email together saying, thank you. And it was just a generic email saying, if you're on my email list, then you've played a part in my life somewhere. And I just want to say thank you for whatever part you played. I'm now retired after 22 years. It's been this, and this. I'll be in Beijing, doing the commentary. I can't wait. Let's keep in touch. Oh, and by the way, I've been told, exact words, that I need to do yoga because my body is broken by the medical team. They've told me. I don't know where to start. So any of you that know anything or any suggestions, let me know. And I got a couple of responses. And one response of friend Debbie, she sent me a message, congratulations, amazing. By the way, I know you're in London a lot, which I was, because it's the build up to the 2012 Olympic Games. I was involved with a lot of the sponsors, and I was a speaker at the time and retired. And so it was all working in my favor, right place, right time. So I was in London a lot. And she said, there's this form of yoga in London. And she gave me the name and she said, it'll kick your ass and you're going to, and I was like, I'm in. Right. And that was it. So it was hot yoga. It was called Bikram yoga, which, we can, you don't need to get into those details, but it's 90 minutes in a boiling hot room. And I walked into this studio in Old Street and there were, no word of a lie, 60 people in there at 10 o'clock on a Friday morning. And the teacher's got a microphone on and she says, right, whose first class is it? Quite like military. And I look around, I put my hand up. And it's like, then you're standing there just in your shorts. It's boiling hot. I say, Mike, you're not going to be able to do all of these poses. You're going to have to lie down. And I was like, right, we'll see about that. So, of course, I had the athlete mentality, taking it into yoga. And that first class, I did them all. And I nearly died because it was so hot. But I proved her wrong because why wouldn't I be there? And I spent the first few weeks and months trying to be the best at it. Can I go further? Can I hold this? Like an Olympian's mentality. And then after a while, I realized it wasn't about that. And my kind of, evolution in that space was able to, and what happened, I wasn't tracking it, but 6 months into practicing that style of yoga, 3 to 5 to 7 times a week if I could. 6 months down the line, I suddenly realized, I was like, my back doesn't hurt. Holy shit. And then I'm like, and why am I getting so annoyed when people are late to meet me? And why am I a bit more chilled in traffic, right? And then that was when the penny dropped for me, guys, because it was then, there's different types of movement, right, for different people at different times. And this was a healing relationship with my body that I'd only ever abused. Red line, stress, bang, come on, can it do better? Then suddenly I moved in with my body in a way that settles me down mentally and emotionally. And then I was able to start to explore what spirituality might mean, how I relate to something bigger than us. And, you know, I never subscribed to religion, but I found my place with the yoga philosophy. I was kind of relating to it, and I felt calmer and more mentally stable than I ever had done. And this transition into what the bloody hell am I going to do when I retire from diving was fully supported by this adventure into this space of yoga practice. And of course now, you know, I've learned how to teach, and my partner of 15 years has a chain of yoga centers. And in fact, that's how we met. I signed up to the yoga teacher training because I wanted to open my own studio. And then I met Ali, and she was delivering the yoga teacher training. We got together, and I decided not to open a studio because she'd already opened studios. So I lived vicariously through that part of the business.
It's crazy how recent 2008 is, but obviously the internet, social media just wasn't really a thing. And this whole like yoga is just like a trend now, right? It's something you see on TikTok, on Instagram. Everyone does it, everyone at least knows about it. But at that time it wasn't a well-known thing, and that really wasn't long ago. And you know, just having to ask the question, like, what is this yoga that you're talking about? It's amazing how you had to go out and search for it. But obviously you mentioned there that the back injury, not to mention the shoulder reconstructions, were hugely part of why you had to retire from diving at what would have been a very difficult time, I imagine, if you were obviously targeting Beijing, plus the fact that you then went out to Beijing to commentate as well, at games that you were hoping to be at as an athlete. Obviously, after the success in Athens, the silver medal, pushing forward to that next cycle, you know, what were the goals, expectations for you in that period? Had you started to consider the idea of retirement, or were you still in that performance-focused mindset? Had you started to explore life outside of diving a little bit more at that time? And, you know, when obviously you spoke about the transition into yoga to help you with the transition out of diving, but like when that decision had to be made, how did you cope with that within yourself?
Yeah, wonderful question, isn't it? The how do you prepare yourself if you do? So for me, the real shock came in between Sydney and Athens, where I had the period of, well, this looks like it's all over. I'm in tears. I'm quitting. 2 shoulder surgeries. I can't make it back. 4th at the Olympics. That's it. You're done. Mental health challenges, but then I figured it, right? And I came back for all of that. And then after Athens, I knew that potentially I was going to be on borrowed time because I was already 26, one of the oldest in the platform event. Could I do another Olympic Games and win gold at 30? Maybe. Was it guaranteed? No. Sure as hell it wasn't guaranteed. So that 4-year period, I was very much aware. I went back to university. I studied business and finance in that 4-year cycle. I didn't complete the degree, but I just did it because I knew I wanted to understand more about the corporate world that I was a professional speaker in. So I'm telling a wonderful hero's journey, but I needed to know what the challenges were about running businesses and managing employees and how the whole thing worked. I did A-level economics, but I wanted to refresh that. So that whole 4-year period, I was aware that it could stop at any time. Now, my goal, or actually how it should have happened, was this. Leon Taylor makes Beijing, wins gold, next to Peter Waterfield, lives happily ever after, right? That was how it should have been. And it didn't happen that way, right? Because it didn't. So luckily for me, there's some upstart. What was his name? Oh yeah, Tom. He was on the scene, right? And so for me, it would have been, the scenario could have been, I could have gone to Beijing, won gold, and it could have all been about Tom, who did brilliantly, but would have placed it. So it's this really interesting, is sliding doors. So I was already prepared to transition into what, I have no idea, but I knew that I had interests, right? I'd already started to carve my teeth as a professional speaker. I was able to build relationships with stakeholders who were going to be supporting the London 2012. I had, the beginnings of the mentor relationship with Tom, who I met when he was 10 in 2004. So I played that role, and I kind of started to understand that professional speaking was a career opportunity. And I knew that I didn't want to go into coaching because the coach is on the poolside more than I was. And so I acknowledged, your commitment, Yoda, because it's like I wanted to step away and do other things to come back to give the knowledge. So the mentoring was my way of giving back. And also I really wanted to grab hold of the commentary. And so that was already in conversation the last 2 years, from 2006 to 2008. I was already in conversations with the BBC because it's around relationships and networking, which I started to understand. So how it worked by way of transition was this. I said to the medical team, I said to the physios, the doctor says, listen, I'm going to keep going. So let's say I'm running into that wall. So one of two things is going to happen. I'm going to keep running into it until that wall breaks down, or I don't get up. Your responsibility, and I'm going to give it to you, is give me the red card before I run into the wall for the last time. So I wanted them to call it because I wanted to focus on everything I could do. Because to be honest with you guys, my head could do it better than it ever could, right? I could handle the pressure like it wasn't there. I was almost detached from it. It was just amazing to be in that place in my career where emotionally and from a mindset point of view, I was so steady, so solid. I could handle pressure. I would just embrace every part of it. I had such a great handle on it after my mental health challenges. But my body just couldn't handle it. And I'd be like fine. And then, my back would be in spasm for weeks. And it was just this back and forth. In the end, the medical team said, there's a red card. And I felt a sense of relief, if I'm honest.
It's really
that I didn't have to keep punishing myself. Didn't have to keep it was traumatic, right? That's a big word, but it was. I mean, it was so frustrating as well, because it was like, I could do it, I can't do it. And then just to get that, you don't have to do it anymore. Right. And then I knew, because I didn't want to walk away with regrets. I did everything I could to get myself physically okay to dive, and I couldn't. So when I went to Beijing, yes, I'm still an athlete in my head, and I was new to the commentary, but I wasn't there, under duress thinking, God, I should be there and I should have been selected. I was like, there's no way I could be there, even though I believed I could easily have won another Olympic medal easily. I could have won another Olympic medal because I just done the 4-year cycle, and I knew in my head I could still do it. But you guys know, when your body, whether it's your knee or Freddie, I know you've had lots of injuries, as we all have. You just can't override the physical restriction, can you? So it's a lot of letting go. So for me, the transition was okay. And I had options, and I missed the sport like crazy. And if I had my own way, I'd still be diving now, because I love it. And what I love really isn't the thrill of the competition, although that's part of it. What I love is the sense of belonging, right? The team that we are and that we earn. And that's the thing I miss the most about the sport, is the sense of belonging. The banter that we would have in between dives on the way to the weight. So we'd be feeling exhausted, but we'd still have those interactions and that knowing and that, that sport family connection, which is so powerful and so strong and so special, that you miss like hell when you step away. Do you guys feel 100%, that as well?
100%, like completely. I think that encapsulates it really well. And, like even me, obviously I spent a few years performing in that diving shows and doing high diving and so on. And like, I almost felt that even more there. You know, we were this team of performers, and there was less competition as well. So it was even more, we were just like this kind of clan, and as you said, the camaraderie. And I've never experienced it in the same way with another group of people. And I always say this to people when they ask about, you know, like friendships and connections and so on. And I have like a very strong group of friends from school, and I have other strong friends. And I don't speak to everyone from the diving community that often, but there's this like layer of connection, like, you know, with, I mean, obviously me and Yona see a lot of each other these days, but, you know, prior to that, like with Yona, with Jack, with Jackson, and all our kind of core group, there's just this connection and understanding, I think. Yeah, that I'll never share.
Breaking bond.
Yeah. And I think that's it. Like, probably knowing that nothing will ever quite be the same.
Well, that's why I chose to stay in the sport as well. Almost like, obviously the coaching side of it, as I mentioned, that responsibility to give back. Yes, ticking that box, great. But actually, I knew that I would miss the environment, the energy, the bond. It's quite funny. We went for a little team meal last night because we've got a French diver over with us at the moment for the week, and the divers were talking about a little group chat that they had made to organise this meal, but I wasn't included in the group chat because I'm not one of the divers, I'm one of the coaches. I was upset. I didn't express my upset, but within myself I was like, oh, I'm not part of the group chat, but I'm not one of the divers anymore. It's so sad.
Us and them, you know how it is, guys. Yeah. Well, luckily, none of us have taken the judge's chair, right? Because that's a definite, you know, and I know many of our, you know, friends who were athletes have stepped into, because they're not quite the enemy, but, you know, yeah, the enemy.
It's exactly what I have in my head about judges. Judges are the enemy. And I will never stay in that chair.
Oh, man. But you know, as kind of onto that, obviously, like you're a father now, Leon, and so, you know, we're talking about like, you know, those good old days and those feelings of camaraderie and kindred spirits and so on. But obviously, you know, I suppose now that you've stepped into that role as a father, and like, you know, that must shift things completely.
Yeah, I mean, it's what's fascinating for me is your priorities shift throughout your career, right? So we talked about the approach as an athlete is very different to the approach as not an athlete. You can't be as, well, you could be, but you could choose not to be as self-centered and as driven, as obsessive compulsive in a world outside of that. Like when I went into the world outside of sport and I was interacting with people, I couldn't understand why people didn't do the things they said they were going to do. Like, it just blew my mind, because in the world of sport, you kind of do it's like this whole commitment. So there's this unlearning on how to operate. And I chose to start a family later. So I feel very privileged that I've kind of done so much, right? I've lived my life, and my life after sport, I had a period of time where my values were freedom and flexibility. So I would just go and do all the things that I never had chance to. I learned to snowboard, I'd go to South Africa, I'd do weddings, I'd just do everything. I wouldn't commit to something that kept me here, if you like. I remember one year I set a goal, can I leave the country every month on holiday? And I managed to hit that goal and stuff. You know, it was just this really indulgent period.
Thunberg would be upset about your carbon footprint.
Yeah, well, exactly. I know. Yeah, do as I say, not as I do. But anyway, so some of the trips went to Edinburgh, and went by train. So which is partly true. But what happens, guys, and this is really interesting, is that when you kind of like, I kind of rebounded out of diving, go, right, I'm going to do all the things I wasn't allowed to do. And you think that's going to make you happy and content. And it is gratifying, but actually it's just dopamine, right? And it's just like, oh, okay. So where's the really rewarding stuff then? And as we talked about earlier, it's the contribution, so giving to others, right? Being a parent, there's nothing like it in that way, because you are giving your all and your best every single day in whatever set of circumstances you're facing. And that could be, just trying to keep something tiny alive, feed, water, and then of course now the interaction and the guidance and I would call it coaching, but not telling a youngster what to do because they won't do it anyway. So it's like, how do you get the message across, and then guiding them in a way to make good choices when they haven't got any way of making good choices. So instead of here's a screen, it's like, let's go out on the scooter, there's a BMX pump track, let's get down. Then interacting in my world now, my priorities. People say, what are you working on? And it's a great question. And I always say, well, my focus at the moment is spending and savoring the time with my son Ziggy, because things, to transition and change quickly. And what he's experiencing now will be very different to what he's experienced in a year. And I want to be part of that. So coming back from, I've just been away delivering a presentation mastery workshop, which we get to deliver all over the UK and in different places as well. It's 2 days of really intense coaching and delivering and performing. And I get back exhausted. And then I hit the sack, it's best night's sleep as I can. And I can't wait to do the school run. Right, because the school one is just so rewarding now, and it's not about the big things; it's about the small things, because they are the big things, right? And so my priorities have changed, and I still like to do adventure stuff. I've just been snowboarding. I was away last week in Lanzarote, Club La Santa, doing lots of different activities. So it's not as if I'm sitting around doing nothing, because as you guys know, that's not great for me at all, even now. The grand old age that I am, but the opportunity to shift the value system once again and prioritize, my well-being, overall, because I can only be a great father if I'm looking after myself, and getting the opportunity to grab those, which maybe my dad didn't, because he was working around the clock, because that's how it was. And I didn't get to see him as much because he was providing for me and my sister. For now, I'm spending so much time with Ziggy, and blink of an eye, he'll be a teenager and I won't be called dad. Well, even if I'm inside, you just can't tell that I'm cool.
That it's though, I think that's exactly the perfect example of what we were saying about in the very beginning about when you're an athlete, you're so sort of focused on yourself and self-absorbed. And then, actually giving back is even more rewarding. And I just wonder if, children is kind of, it's the perfect example of that. You're completely outside yourself. They're, more important than you. I mean, I haven't experienced this yet, but I can, I want to, and I imagine that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to dress it up in a way that it isn't difficult. And it's a double-edged sword, because it is all of that. And it's the hardest thing you've ever done. And there's no returns label. It's not like, oh, I didn't need that thing from Amazon. Just it's the biggest disruptor that you'll ever embrace. And of course, because of that, it has all of the richness of the highs and the lows. And the other thing is just the learning, right? So we are most alive, I would assert, when we are on purpose, right? Whatever that means. But like when you're learning to do something, right, it's massively captivating. And being a parent is non-stop figuring stuff out. Can we get out of the house on time? Can we do that? Can I engage in this? Can I get that? Can we choose some vegetables instead of, whatever. You're constantly refining, learning, understanding, pivoting, all of these wonderful, nourishing things that are so stimulating cognitively. And the best way to parent is to be able to manage your own emotions, your emotional regulation. And that's the hardest thing, because you suddenly turn into your parents because I say so. And I'm like, oh no, that's the word. Those are the words. Oh, I need a difference. And it's brilliant because I'm this, I've had a lot of time, in the world of high performance, as a speaker, I look at mindset, executive coaching, which is something I'm really passionate about. I talk about, constraints, emotional regulation, and managing state all the time. And I'm terrible in the environment where, partners and children are involved, or in my case, child, because, you're only human. And that's great. Why? Because I can continue to improve. And that's just wicked, isn't it? It's not about being right, being perfect, all that nonsense. It's about just, okay, what can I do differently next time? How can I go about it in a smarter, more elegant way, or figure it out? And that for me is deeply rewarding and exhausting
That concept of continuous problem solving is something I actually quite enjoy. I really love it. I find that in coaching now. And that's I feel like that's the joy of life. It is, we are just continuously problem solving and figuring things out. No one really knows what they're doing. Some of the top CEOs or top football managers, no one knows the secret. It's just some people are better at figuring it out than other people. And I mean, you're doing some endurance events, marathons, Ironmans as well. You also get to do that in those events. Is that problem solving and kind of ticking that box in a different way?
Yeah, good call. So I once my lower back had settled down, I wanted to do something that was kind of had a goal setting framework, but there was a caveat to that, right? Because as soon as I ran the London Marathon for Sports Aid for charity, I found myself in a position where I had a personal best, which is a dangerous position for someone like me to be in, and you too, because I then suddenly go, right, well, what's the latest watch that I need to purchase? And what are the minute miles that I need to run? And what are the new trainers? And can I get a training program? And then I'm like, uh-oh, alarm bells. Why am I doing this? So running I chose because, number one, I hated it. I hated running, and that's why I chose it. I chose it because I didn't want to be a fraud standing on the stage talking to people about getting out of your own way and embracing difficulty, doing things, if I wasn't brave enough to step into something like the world of running because I wasn't very good at it. So I didn't like it, hurt my back, I'm not doing it. Well, that's fixed mindset, Leon. Oh, okay, fair enough. So then I would use running as an example of being a beginner again, framing it in a different way. And so those events that you mentioned there, Yona, the ultras and such like, what they were examples of, can I complete it rather than can I be faster than last time? So I chose one of the most difficult Ironman on the planet, and I did it when I turned 40, just because I wanted to prove to myself that the belief of when you get old you can't do anything, all that nonsense, was just a very powerful experience. And it gave me several years to learn a new sport. I could already swim, fine. Bike, didn't know what I was doing, fueling, nutrition, running a marathon at the end of it. So this whole kind of training plan was amazing. And I wasn't going for a time. I was going for completion and enjoyment during it, right? And the Ironman took me 12 hours and 10 minutes in Lanzarote. I was one of the first out the water because I'm pretty quick at swimming for my swimming days. And then I spent the whole time being overtaken for the rest of the race. Every cyclist went by me and then running. So it's just, but that for me was wonderful part of it because my ego needed to deal with that thing, right? So, this was just this whole experience. And it was so fulfilling and rewarding because I was able to set goals, follow a training program, commit to something, move with purpose. I was outside, green exercise. I was learning new skills. I was buying new kit and having fun there. It just did all of these wonderful things, but it didn't fall into, guys, that place of, now how are you going to improve? And then that performance curve that we all know too well, that you eventually get to the incremental gains or 1%. So I didn't want to be there. I wanted to make big steps forwards without becoming a bit of an arse because I was training so hard trying to beat a bullshit PB in a marathon that, I did my second London Marathon in fancy dress so I wouldn't go for a PB, and I did a 20-minute PB. So,
this is,
well, because I was bullshitting myself. I was like, well, I'm going to run in a tutu and a purple wig, and I'm going to train, but I'm not interested in the time. And I ran like crazy, and I ran, 20 minutes quicker than the first one. And then I was like, right, well, you now need to be careful, which is why I don't do high rocks or anything like that. Because it's just like I can't take it easy. I just kill myself in something like that because my default is just red line. So now I just need to pick and choose.
This is scaring me because I couldn't imagine anything worse than doing an Ironman or a high rocks or a marathon because I hate all those things. But a lot of what you're saying sounds exactly like me right now. And I'm fearful that I'm going to go on this same path of discovery and be like, oh, I'm going to have to do an Ironman, aren't I? And oh dear, yeah, the thought of it is making me feel uncomfortable already.
Well, you need to chat to the other coaches. So let's give Tom and Adam a mention.
Well,
Tom
yeah.
Owens and those boys are just, Tom is eyeing up some long distance stuff. I know Adam is as well. So yeah, you're going to look to the culture. Stop being so lazy. Is that right, Freddie?
Saying I have a fixed mindset, and I don't
get to that red line. But
but it's
I think what I've enjoyed, I've got one more thing to ask, but what I've enjoyed so much about this conversation and what I've really realized is it's kind of what you've said there, Yona, but it's like checking myself, but in the sense of, I think it's, from my position now, it's kind of easy to look back on, because when you retired, I was really young, right? And so how I wasn't that close to you, right? Of course, I didn't really understand you. And now what I see is this person who has, as you said, you've done the marathons and the Ironmans, and yoga is like part and parcel into your belief system, and coaching executives and all these the commentary and like all these amazing things. But it's the fact that actually it's easy to sit there now and think, oh well, Leon, yeah, well, he must have just liked yoga, and oh well, he must just really enjoy Ironmans, and I just think but you've just made it so obvious in this that how you explained yoga was so funny to me, but it was like such a check of like, no, he didn't just love it. It's like you had to figure it out. You tried it for some random reason. Life pushed you in that direction. The same thing with the Ironmans, all this stuff. It's like things just happen. And then you also have to be ready to like challenge and check yourselves. It's not, we're not written and pre-programmed to just like have this one definite path and like, oh, well, I'm not good at this, so I don't do this. I've lived in that space of thinking for a lot of my life. And so, and I've gotten myself out of it, but I still have to check it. And so this conversation has been really helpful for me in this regard.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's as you guys have already said, no one's got it figured out, and it's that curiosity to just go and have a look, right? So I as a coach and a mentor and all of those lovely roles, there's lots of these I don't know, exercises out there that say, right, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years, right? Which I think are useful exercises. And I find them impossible. Easy when I was a sports person, impossible now. And I just want to call out being open to the opportunities to explore new things through curiosity can lead you to places that you never knew possible. So yoga, I didn't know that word existed, to be honest, until my whole world came to a massive crunching halt. And they said, here's this thing you knew nothing about, go and look at it. And I went and had a look at it, and then had another look with curiosity, and then pulled me to the place I am now, which if you'd have asked me to write my 5 or 10 year plan when I was coming to the end of my career, it would have just been so limited, right? Because I knew what I liked and I was so obsessed about whatever it was, there was elements that are still true. I love to be with people, right? I love to perform. There's things that are really important to me that my values kind of system allows me to engage with things fully, if it's all lined up. But there are so many things out there that I would have never gone near unless I was curious, right? And curiosity can lead you into some places you think, well, what am I doing here? This is awful. And good when that happens, because now one of my biggest bugbears is when someone decides, foolishly, in my opinion, that they don't like something ahead of not trying it. Now, you've got to be careful with this. Like, so I like sushi, and some people go, raw fish. Oh. And I'm like, have you ever tried it? No. I'm like, well, how'd you know? But then you got things like crack and heroin. And I wouldn't say that you should try those first to see whether you like them or not. So there should be some boundaries in place. So, I just want to frame that, because it's like, be curious, try everything, and you get yourself in a bit of a muddle. So
big disclaimer there, don't go and try crack.
Yeah.
Yeah, disclaimer. But, let's just... So try everything, apart from really dangerous. I don't know. but, 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 but again, so just to kind of bring that back on, it's the curiosity, isn't it? So I found myself in a world of a very rigid world of elite sport, where you just kind of, fine tune and you're the best. And then if you're not careful, you just kind of want to stay there, being the best at what you do and not try anything else because you're a beginner again. And letting go of that and being a beginner again is the most freeing thing that you can do. And for me, reading all I do about longevity and cognitive health as you get older, like learning a language, learning instruments, learning new things, just shows that, our brains are designed to keep working, and we shouldn't just specialize and limit ourselves. And I need to be careful that I don't just start a million things with my ADHD kind of tendencies and then never commit to anything. So there's a balance there as well for all of us, but for me.
Yeah, I have that issue as well. But the last thing, and I think, but I do think that's a really good message. The last thing that I wanted to ask in this main section, just, and maybe if you could just try and summarize this quickly, because I think this would be really valuable to everyone really who's not tried it, but I think in particular to current athletes who aren't already using meditation in some form as a practice, because it's something that I experimented with but never cemented until fairly recently. But I think it's been one of the most important kind of daily habits that I've been able to form in recent years. And, I know looking back that it would have helped my career as an athlete. And so with all of your experience, I know you've done stuff with Headspace, which is incredible. What would your message be? I know you don't like giving advice either, but what would your message to current athletes be in terms of meditation if they're not already practicing it or if they're struggling with it?
Yeah. I mean, the struggle often comes because you're trying to be good at it. And that was my biggest thing. It's like, am I doing it right? Where's the results? And the trying is the antithesis of what you're attempting to do. So my suggestion is this, Freddie. I think there's a stage before meditation, and that's breath work, right? And this isn't necessarily the Wim Hof breath work, which is holotropic breath work, which is hyperventilation. That's all very powerful stuff, and it's one modality. I've recently trained with the Oxygen Advantage of Patrick McEwen, which is kind of functional breath work. Now, I would say if you've got control of your emotional regulations through your breath, it will allow you to settle down your mind a little bit, and then other opportunities to work in that mindfulness space. And that could be meditative practices. Many meditation practices are connected to the breath. That's certainly where I started and had the most amount of success, not by way of doing it, by being consistent. So mindfulness isn't hard. You just need to do it. So it's about bringing it into the routine, not looking for the results that maybe aren't going to be there, just allowing it to be something that is foundational. And it's not about quieting the mind and, being a Zen master. It's about observing your thoughts with curiosity, with interest, about following the instructions. And there's so many apps out there, so many different opportunities. But like anything, if you want strong biceps, right, you need to do bicep curls, and you don't do them once a month. It's a consistent practice. All of the things that we've talked about, it's a consistent practice. And if you can bring that into your routine and not make it have to do something, just be curious as to, okay, what am I kind of like, I'm feeling a little bit more settled. Well, I've been doing meditation or a form of meditation for 5 minutes a day or 5 times a week for 4 weeks. How interesting, right? Rather than, I tried it once, couldn't do it, and I'm gone, which is the certainly the approach I've made with certain things before. So it's the patience that's required and the consistency. But for me, start with the breath.
I think one way that you framed it puts it in a really kind of great context, rather than thinking, I think people often think about mindfulness and meditation as a bit of a gimmick or something like that. But the way that you said observing your thoughts is really interesting, because I think people are often running away from their own thoughts, and that's why they then use various things to get away from their thoughts. But being comfortable and in control of observing your own thoughts, if it is for a few minutes a day, is extremely powerful, because it just brings so much comfort and calm and consistency within yourself. And when that can become natural, then I think the world is your oyster, because that means you can make really good decisions in difficult circumstances, you can become extremely resilient. And in that case, success, whatever that looks like for you, will follow. Happiness, contentness will follow. And that was a, I think, really good way of putting it. With all that being said, I think it was a really nice summary to kind of close off the main section of the episode. And also kind of tied nicely into your character as well. I'd love to hear what the title of the episode is going to be. So I'd like to ask you the question, if your career so far was a movie, what would the title be?
Yeah, so this is a fun one for me to consider. And so what I've come up with, we've got to be careful because your podcast has got the word dive in it. So there was a lot of tendency to that. So I went for Between the Boards, right? And for me, there's a multi-layer to that. So can I give you a little reflection on how so Between the Boards. So obviously you've got the nod to diving, right? But the most powerful things happen between the time on the boards for me. So the Past the Pigs was the time, where it counted, right? So it's a really interesting word of reflection on how did you win your Olympic medal? Well, I played Past the Pigs in between each dive, and that was between the time on the boards. And then the other kind of play on words for me is that training 6-7 hours a day is boring. So boredom is a thing. So it's like, it's like this interesting, like, what are you going to do to the boredom? And then, of course, Between the Boards, there were maybe one or two misadventures that I haven't mentioned so much of today. But if there was a movie, then that would be where most of the interesting scenes and content would be. So misadventures between the boards. So that's what I came up with, guys. Hopefully that lands for you. And that's my summary of thinking.
I love it.
So how should we spell boards then?
Yeah, just spell boards as in diving boards, but it's just it was just to give you a little kind of nod as to my thinking and kind of where I am now. So it's not all about what happens when you're on the board. It's the spaces in between, and that's nice because that leans into the meditation as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And with that being said, I feel like we've only really scratched the surface. I feel like there's so much more that we could speak about, but time is limited, unfortunately.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree. I feel like obviously, I think both Yoda and I we've already said our thanks, so we won't do that to you again. But I really enjoyed this conversation. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that is where we will wrap up this main episode. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you to Leon. But Leon is going to hang around for one more dive, our bonus section. So if you're not there yet, the link is in the show notes. And we'll see you over there or in the next one. Cheers.